Hi there! Today I'm going to do a special set of CSSBattle.dev challenges. Hope you enjoy! Alright, so this is battle number 37, which is height, and I'm just going to go through them one by one. In this video, I will go through these first 4, and then in part 2, I will go through the last 4. There's only 5 more days at the time of this recording, so I'm just going to quickly try to solve them. Wish me luck! After this challenge is over, you will still be able to do these challenges, but it won't be tracked by the website. Without further ado, let's start with challenge number 243. I'm not really going to follow the code golf rules. All I want to do is be able to solve this in a way that I find readable. So what is this one? This one is the shape of a corn. And I guess to start, I will plot the body tag as per usual. Add in my variables, black, gray, and light gray. And I will paste those variables in. I will then plot the background layer to be the black variable. And let's see what to do here. I think we got to break it down a little bit. I think I will make the div the container for all the shapes within the corn shape, but let's add a display of grid with place items center. I will turn on the diff mode and adjust the width and height until it matches the outside of that shape. Looks like 300. Now we can adjust the height too, so this will be 90, and we can leave the background here for now. We'll remove it later. I'm thinking for the basic shapes we can just use the background property to plot them. So I'm just going to leave that original background for now. We can deal with that and go ahead and start with a linear gradient. I'm just going to add a little space because my avatar is in the way. You know what? One moment. I'm going to move my Pngtuber to the right. Okay, that's much better. Now I don't have to adjust the editor every time we reach the bottom. Okay, so for this linear gradient, I'm just going to add a dummy color. Just need to put my default values here. Let's now move the x-axis along. Okay, got it. And the y-axis down. We can adjust the width of this now too. 50, and that will be 80. 80 in height? Yes. Nice, and that will create this square here. Let's make that light gray, and then we can add a linear gradient on top, and let's add a dummy color here too. We can move this x-axis along until it reaches the beginning of the stalk. We can afford to give a little room here to overlap. Adjust the y-axis. Cool. Now we can adjust the width. 45, and the height 20. Perfect. Now this one can be var gray. Cool, so we got 2 things sorted. Now we will add a div selector for before and after pseudo element. Add in a content of empty string, a position of absolute, and display of block. Now we can target the before pseudo element. And let's try to create this grid of squares here. So first of all, I'm going to add a dummy width and height. And we can adjust it as we go along. Background, let's say blue. Okay, close enough. 110 for the width. We can add a top property 5 pixels. That's going from the top. So actually here on the div, we will need to add a position of relative. Just so when the before and after pseudo elements are positioned, it would be in relation to the original div instead of the whole canvas. Okay, that's right. Now let's try 80. And I think that will work. Let's just see. Okay, that is working for the outside edge of those grid of squares. We can now add a border radius. Let's say 40 pixels, 0, 0, 40. Great. And for the background, let's see what we should do. I'm going to create a linear gradient, and I will plot those default values with no repeat. And let's just try to recreate one of the squares first. So I'm just going to add a dummy color. Now let's adjust the size of this dummy color. So that will be 30, and the height will also be 30. I'm going to say this blue will be 10 and red 10, and we can also bring that down. I'm just going to clear everything inside this linear gradient and start over. So actually we will start with a transparent and then plot 10, then go var gray at 10, but let's bring that up so it's actually black here. And I think that's it for our horizontal lines. Now we can put a linear gradient on top, also 30, 30 being the canvas. We add a repeat there, turn our linear gradient 90 degrees and start with the transparent value. We can plot 20 pixels here and var black 20 pixels. And that should work for this first part. Nice. Now I might have to bring this outside shape up. That works, just increase it by 10. Cool. And now what we need to do is create the corn husk part of this shape. So let's go ahead and put in our after pseudo element selector, just seeing how I should approach this. So let's go ahead and add some dummy values. Width and height, 100 pixels. Let's add a background of red. Let's turn on the diff mode again. The height is actually 80. Let's make the height 90. Let's add a left property, 130 for the left property, and the width should be a bit longer. Nice. Actually, the height should be half of this, so 45. I'm going to try a different method out. I'll just comment these values first. I will need them later. I'm going to put in a dummy width and height again and add a border radius of 50% and display block and a background of blue or something. I'm going to add a left property. Oh, that's the same, so we can probably move this here. Left is still 130 and bottom. Oh, okay. That is useful information. So it looks like if I were to create a circle here, it would be 100 in width and height. Okay, let's comment this out. And with this information, I think we will be able to solve this puzzle. So let's just comment out that, and we will use this information to try and plot the background property. Let's keep that background there. Let's just add a border radius here too, so that's 0, 35, 0, 0. Cool. And here, let's try and plot our radial gradient. Let's make it 100, 100, no repeat. Let's actually make this 100. And blue of 50 and red of 50. We can move the x-axis minus 50. Let's just turn off the diff mode. And y minus 50. Let's turn off the diff mode again. Okay, that's not quite right. Let's move the x-axis. Okay, so how should we shift this? I think we need to shift the y-axis. I just changed the no repeat to repeat. I wonder if we can move the y-axis up, and will that match? Let me just bring this down a bit. 52, 50, 50 does it. Okay, let's try that. We can add our WebKit box reflect and go below 0. Let's change this blue value to be gray and this red to be transparent. And we can probably get rid of this bit here. I'm going to add a linear gradient on top just to cover the rest of that husk. Add in gray and shift the x-axis along. Cool. Let's turn off the diff mode, have a look. And now let's go back to the div and remove this background color. And I think we have solved this puzzle. Finally! Okay, now let's turn off the diff mode. And it looks about right. So now we can press the submit button and see if we've solved this first challenge in our battle. Nice, and that's our 100% result. Okay, now that's done. Let's go on to the next challenge. This challenge is number 244, Medusa. I feel this is a little easier than our corn challenge. We can go ahead and plot our body selector and add in our variables. Let's paste those hex codes in. I'm going to add the background property var white, and let's see how to plot these shapes here. I might actually use the background property to plot all those rectangular shapes and go from there. Linear gradient, I'm putting in my default values. And let's start with the first row of rectangles. So I'm just going to plot a dummy color first. I'll turn on the diff mode and I will shift the x-axis along. Let's just comment out this div for now. I'm going to bring the y-axis down and adjust the height to be 20 pixels and the width to be 300. Now we can take our blue value, rotate our linear gradient 90 degrees and plot each section. So black 20, transparent 20, that is actually 40. Cool. And this gap seems to be 20 pixels, so I'm going to plot 60 pixels here and plot black again, starting at 60 pixels. Now it looks like each pixel here is about 40 pixels in height and width. I'm just going to guess the measurements based on that. So black 60, 20 times 3 is 60, so this will also be 120. Then the next bit is a transparent starting at 120. And this part is also 60 pixels in width, I reckon. So 180, and then let's plot black again, starting at 180. And this next line is also 60 pixels in width. So 18 plus 6 is 24, so that's 240. And let's plot transparent again, starting at 240. That gap is 20 pixels, so that will be 640. 20 pixels, so that is 260. And finally var black at 260 here for this line. Perfect. Now the next line. Let's add a linear gradient here on top of the one that we just created. Plot our default values, add in a dummy color. Let's just shift the x-axis along 70 and the y-axis 80. And the height will be 20 pixels. The width will be maybe 260. Yep, we can rotate our linear gradient again. The first bit is 20 pixels, so let's plot var black 20 pixels, transparent 20 pixels to 40 pixels, var black 40 pixels. This will also be 20 pixels in width, so that's 60. The next section, 60 pixels, also another 20 pixel gap, and var black again, starting from 80 pixels to 100 pixels, and now we are up to that big gap above the head of the Medusa. So let's plot transparent 100, and that's a 60 pixel width gap, so that's 160. Let's plot another black variable, 160 to 180, transparent 180 to 200, var black 200 to 220, because each pixel block here is about 20 times 20 in width and height. So let's just keep going until we finish the second row of rectangles, or squares in this case. 240, var black 240. Nice. One more row of these. Let's add another linear gradient and add our dummy value. Let's bring our x-axis along to 70 pixels. Let's bring our y-axis down to 100 pixels. This is 20 pixels in height, and the same as the previous row, it is 260 in width. Let's turn our linear gradient 90 degrees. Let's plot var black, and this first section will be 60 pixels, so that's what we'll plot. And the next bit is transparent, starting at 60 pixels. That will be 20 in width, so we can plot 80 pixels. var black again to create another square, so that's 80 pixels to 100. And then again, we're at the gap above the Medusa's head, so that's 100 to 160. And now we can plot another black variable from 160 to 180, and a transparent of 180 to 200. Now for this black variable, the width is 60 pixels, so it will go from 200 to 260, and we don't actually have to plot the second value because that's the end of our gradient here. So cool, we have figured that first part out. Now I think it's smooth sailing, so let's uncomment our div here. Let's add a display of grid and place items of center. I'm gonna go to my div selector, and I'm just gonna add a position of relative here and shift the top value down a bit, 20 pixels. Yep, adjust the height, 140. Oh, I think we can afford to bring this down a bit. Yes, no, 120 for height, and the top value, wow, that's top value is 30. Okay, now we got it correct. We can add a border radius here, 0, 0, 50, nice. And all that we have left to create are those eyes. But before we do that, we can change the background of the head of the Medusa to be black. Underneath the div selector, let's just add in a before pseudo element with the content of empty string, add a display block and a position of absolute. Let's add some dummy values here. How wide do we think the eye is? I'm just gonna put in a guess and put a background blue. Wow, that is way too wide. That looks a bit more accurate. So here we can rotate our eye a little bit, maybe 10 degrees to start with. That's not enough, so let's try that. Add top value of 10 and 30 and change the left value bit to, oh, that is perfect. Now we can add a WebKit box reflect. Be aware this only works on WebKit browsers, so that will be a right of, not quite. Okay, since this won't work for us, I'm just going to put in another selector with the div before and after element and move content, display and position. Actually, we can move a bunch of these over. Let's move all these values over to this shared selector. And the only difference, I think the left one should go here too. And then we can copy and paste that, change it to the after pseudo element, and this rotation will be minus instead. We can move the left property, and that is 60. Now we can change this background to be white, and we have solved our puzzle for this Medusa challenge. Let's turn off the diff mode and compare, and it looks good. So let's press submit. Nice, and we have 100%. Okay, now on to the next challenge. I think it's going pretty well so far. So now we are up to 245 not. And let's just think how we should do this. I reckon we might be able to do this within the background property. Okay, so we can start with the body selector, and I don't think we need variables today, because the HTML color names of white and black can already be used for what we need here. So we can jump right in to using the background, and we don't even need white. I reckon we can start with the radial gradient, put in our default values, because that's what I like to do. I will plot red 10, blue 10 just to start off with. I'm going to adjust my canvas a little, maybe make it 200. And let's shift that along. But first of all, let's turn on the diff mode. We can increase this value to make it easier to see. 30, 30, and then let's shift our x-axis along. Bring our y-axis down. Okay, let's increase this. 35 might work better. And update the y-axis. Not quite. Okay, 34 times 34 is the right value. And we can try guess what the thickness of the circle border is, so let's just put in a value here, 64. Now we can update this red value to be transparent and this blue value to be black. Now we can add a linear gradient on top, add in dummy value. I will just jump right into it actually. So let's go blue 100, red 100. We can actually turn our linear gradient 90 degrees. Blue 151 seems to work, so let's just change our red here. 160, blue 160, 185, and plot 200. Now red 200, and let's just increase the width here. 215, nice. I think that's all we need to do. We just need to bring this y-axis down, and we can change the height and update these values. So this blue can be transparent, this red can be white, this blue can be black, and this red can be transparent. Now we have two more shapes to go, so a linear gradient, plot 0, 0, 100, 100, no repeat, add in dummy value, move the x-axis along, 249, move down our y value, and a width, 64, 64, and our height 20, 30, 30. That works. Now we can change this value to be black. Oh no, it's not a variable. We can just use black. I'm just so used to doing that now. Now one more linear gradient. Then we can put in our dummy value and shift the x-axis along. 185 and the width should be 30. And we can also shift the y-axis down and also adjust the height. 96. Let's change the blue and we have solved this puzzle. So let's turn off the diff mode. Compare. Not quite right. It's a bit funny. Or is that a rendering issue? It might be a rendering issue because it looks right there. Strange. I wonder if I should wing it because it's close enough, but I'm not sure what's going on. I don't know if you can see, but it's like a pixel off. Let's see what I can do. Maybe I can change the way this overlaying gradient works. I'm gonna get rid of all this and add our dummy value just so I can figure this out. Let's turn on the diff mode again. Shift the x-axis along. 185. Okay, that's 151 and the width of that section is 64. Okay, now we can try and add in those values again. So I'll just turn my linear gradient 90 degrees, add in white, let's say 30, and black 30. Let's just update this until it matches. Okay, white 34, black 34. Let's just uncomment this part and see if we're good. If I turn on the diff mode, will it match? Okay, that matches a little bit better. I just see a little blip here. Let's see how to fix this. Maybe we can bring this value up a bit. I'm going to change this to red. Turn on the diff mode and let's change it to black. There's still a little bit of a blip there. Okay, I'm just going to go and press submit to see if this matches because it's pretty close. I just see a really small difference around this area and I'm worried I might not get 100%. But let's test it out and press submit. Okay, I've got 100%, so we're good. Now to the next challenge. Okay, now we're up to challenge 246, limbs. This will be the last challenge I will do in this video set, then I'll leave the last four for the next one. So where to start here? We can start with the body selector, add in our variables, and paste those in. Now we can add the background property and put in our variable black. I'm just seeing what we should do here today. First of all, I can plot out all the rectangular shapes in the background. So I'll use linear gradient, plot in our default values, and let's just add a dummy color here. Let's bring up the x-axis value. Let's turn on the diff mode too. So I'm going to start with the set of vertical rectangles. Cool, 160, and adjust that width. Now we can go ahead and plot these values. So I'm just going to add in some random ones here to start with and just adjust this blue value until it matches. 100 and 100 here too. Now we can probably plot 200 and a blue of 200. Okay, not quite, but we can update that. 207. That's a funny value. Let's turn off the diff mode and have a look. Alright, I mean, that works out. So we can change this blue to be var white. Okay, it's a little off. We can adjust it, make this transparent. Let's bring this x-axis down or up. Okay, 157 and the width 64. Now let's change this value 99. Okay, that looks slightly better. 207, 207. Okay, those are funny numbers, but it seems to work here. Now we can create the middle line using another linear gradient. Plot in the default values again, and let's just put in our white variable here. Let's shift the x-axis along. Let's do that. Adjust the width. Okay, and also the height. We can also bring our y-axis down. Oh, that was a good guess. Now let's see how to do these shapes here. Alright, I'm going to add in a div before and after pseudo element. Add in content of empty string, display block, and position absolute. For this div, I'm gonna first add display grid to the body with place items center. Oh, this layout is off center a little bit, I realized. Anyways, I guess we can deal with that too. So we can go back to the div and keep increasing it until it kind of matches to 80 and add a position of relative. Shift the left property a little bit and keep increasing the width. Let's see. Maybe since the shape isn't completely center, we don't need to do this display grid place item center thing. Let's just add in position, relative, and zero out the margin. Then we can go back to the div and change this position to be absolute and left axis 43. These are funny values, but let's just go along with it. Okay, 292. Then the top will be 35 and the height will be 236. Cool. Now we can go back to our before and after pseudo element. Let's just create some dummy values here with a background blue. Adjust the width. That is smaller than 100, so that's 64. And our height, let's go with 120. Let's try 128, but we can add a border radius and see how big this curve is. Okay, that curve might be right. So that will work for the before pseudo element, and let's just paste that below it and change it to after. So the border radius here would be in the second value slot instead. This before is in the correct place. Let's shift the after to be on the right side. Okay, got it wrong. This actually should be the third slot. Nice. Now we can change this background to be the white variable. Let's adjust the height. Okay, 128 is correct. And for both the before and after pseudo element, we can add a WebKit box reflect below 0, probably a negative value. And I think we have it. So now we can remove this div background, and I think we've solved our puzzle. Let's turn off the diff mode and have a look. Yes, it matches. So we can just double check by pressing submit. Nice, and we have 100%. That is 4 out of 8 of our challenges in the battle number 37 that we have solved. Come back and check out my next video to see how I solved the last 4. Thanks for watching, and as always, happy coding!